How to enter the BIOS on Windows 10 and older versions. Many roads lead to the BIOS. A simple keystroke at the right moment, while the system is booting, will get you into the BIOS. If you have a newer Windows computer, maybe one that came with UEFI BIOS, you can enter the BIOS even more easily. To save you the guesswork, we have compiled all the different ways how you can enter the BIOS on Windows 10, Windows 8, and older versions. Note, inside the BIOS you can change many basic computer settings, like the boot order, system time and date, or enabled hardware components. That's why the BIOS basic input-output system is also known as setup. Newer computers just boot too fast. Thus newer versions of Windows feature an easier way to access the BIOS. But you first have to boot into Windows. Go to Settings, Windows plus I, greater than Update and Security greater than Recovery, and under Advanced Startup click Restart Now. Note that this will actually restart your computer. When you restart using Advanced Startup, you'll first get to choose your boot options. On the screen that comes up, go to Troubleshoot greater than Advanced Options greater than UEFI Firmware Settings and click Restart, which will boot straight into your UEFI BIOS from Windows 10. Windows 8 simplified access to the BIOS. Instead of key combos, you can just use the Windows 8 boot options menu. To summarize, open the Charms bar, for example by pressing the key combination Windows plus C. Click the Settings icon, and select Change PC Settings in the bottom right. Within PC Settings, navigate to the General tab and click Restart Now under the Advanced Startup header. In Windows 8.1, the steps are slightly different. Within PC Settings, navigate to the Update and Recovery tab, then go to Recovery, and finally click Restart Now under Advanced Startup. The computer will restart into boot options, which include the UEFI BIOS. Like on Windows 10, go to Troubleshoot greater than Advanced Options greater than UEFI Firmware Settings and click Restart to boot into your BIOS. If you're still using Windows 7 or an earlier Windows version, you'll have to employ the traditional way of entering the BIOS, i.e., wait for the right moment and hit the right key. The right moment is sometime between powering on the computer and before the operating system is launching. The window is so narrow because the BIOS essentially only initializes your hardware before handing over to the bootloader, which boots the operating system. Once the operating system is starting up, often indicated by the display of the respective logo, you missed the moment. You might see a message that indicates the right moment. It most likely says something like press less than del greater than to enter setup, meaning it also reveals which key to press. In the absence of such a message, the right moment generally is when you see manufacturer logos prior to the booting of the operating system. And the easiest way to not miss the time when you can enter the BIOS is to press the right key even before you power on the computer and hold it until the BIOS comes up. If that doesn't work, you're not pressing the right key or something is broken. As you already gathered, it depends on your hardware. More specifically, it depends on the motherboard the BIOS is located on. Common keys to enter the BIOS are F1, F2, F10, Delete, ESC, as well as key combinations like Ctrl plus Alt plus ESC or Ctrl plus Alt plus Delete, although those are more common on older machines. Also note that a key like F10 might actually launch something else, like the boot menu. The exact key or key combination depends on your computer manufacturer and model. You can proceed with trial and error until you find the right key. Press multiple different keys at once and get lucky, or consult the list below. If your computer features an Acer BIOS, you can restore the BIOS to bootable settings by pressing and holding the F10 key. Once you hear 2 beeps, settings have been restored. Older hardware might require the key combination Ctrl plus Alt plus F3 or Ctrl plus Alt plus Insert key or Fn plus F1. If you know that your computer is using an MSI motherboard, then the key to trigger the BIOS most likely is the delete key. You might even notice a message saying, press del to enter setup. If your BIOS has an assist key, try to press and hold it while you power on the laptop. This also works if your Sony BIOS came with Windows 8. Unfortunately, there is very little consistency. Neither do computer manufacturers always use the same motherboard manufacturer, nor do motherboard manufacturers consistently define the same key for entering the BIOS. If you want a definite answer on which keys to press to enter setup, you have to search for the exact model of your computer's motherboard. If none of the keys mentioned above work, the issue might be your keyboard, or rather the lack of keyboard drivers before the computer boots up. Try another keyboard and/or port. For example, if you've been using a USB keyboard, but your PC also has a PS2 port, try a PS2 keyboard instead. If your computer won't boot, the BIOS may be to blame. Here's how to enter it and reset it to the factory defaults to fix those problems. Text source, makeuseof.com.